Hello, and welcome again to the 10th Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. In this afternoon session, we will cover scams, fraud, and cybersecurity, and how to protect your business connectivity. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Jarrah country where we meet today and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land, the Dja Dja Wurrung people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. My name is Sarah Wilmington, and I am currently the General Manager for Vincent's Chartered Accountants. I work extensively with businesses in Metro and regional Queensland to assist them with their growth strategies through collaborations and training. Now, before we start this session, you will see a poll appear on your screen. We'd like to find out how many of you have been affected by scams, fraud, or cybersecurity issues. So simply select yes or no to the poll appearing on your screen, and we'll check back in a little bit later on those results. Now, it's an important fact to know that no size business is immune to fraud. From the largest corporations to the smallest of business owners can be targeted by hackers in pursuit of sensitive information. In fact, in a report released in June this year, the ACCC stated that email scams alone cost Australian businesses $132 million in that last financial year. The average small business lost over $11,000, but other reported losses of up to $200,000. We know that blows like this are enough to force a small business to close and certainly cost the owners their livelihoods. With Bendigo being such a hub of business activity and a very strong manufacturing sector, as well as a current export revenue estimated at $4 billion, it's not hard to see why the Invention and Innovation Festival was the initiative of the Bendigo City Council. And the topic of scams, fraud, and cybersecurity is oh so important. Now, in this session, we have three highly skilled presenters that give us a wide view of cybersecurity, each of them from a variety of backgrounds and beginnings, and with experience both globally as well as locally. As we know, the digital world we live in is non-discriminative as to where we live. So the structure of this session is that each panelist in turn will have a brief moment to share their experience with you, and then I'm going to move us into a facilitated Q&A. The floor will then be open to questions that you may have in relation to your own business or experience. Now, please remember, this is the ideal time to learn as much as you can from the presenters. So use the opportunity to ask your questions through the chat box function, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So I'm going to start the introductions with Damien. Now, Damien, who at the tender age of 11 was part of a hacker collective, which sparked his interest in security. Goodness me, lucky for us, he chose the right path. Over to you, Damien, to let us know all about you.
Thank you very much. I'm Damien Manuel. I'm from Deakin University. I'm the Director of the Cybersecurity Research and Innovation Centre. I'm also the Chair for the Australian Information Security Association, which is the peak body for cybersecurity. I wanted to share with you just briefly some of the common tools that cybercriminals will use to attack you, organizations, and your family. And by far the easiest of those tools is what we call social engineering. And social engineering is where they'll try and trick you to click on a particular link. You'll either get that link through email, which is called phishing. It'll come through a SMS potentially, which is called smishing, or you might receive a call, which is called vishing. And so the aim is to trick you to click on that link, and when you click on that link, to either provide additional information or to open up something which is malicious. And that malicious component is called the technical exploitation, where they're looking to take advantage of a flaw or a vulnerability in a system. So I'm going to very quickly show you some examples of phishing emails. So in this example, the email looks like it's a legitimate email from the Department of Human Services requesting additional information. You can see at the top of the email, the sender address looks a bit weird. It's not quite right. They've used the lock, because we've often told people when you see the padlock, things are safe, to try and trick you into thinking that this is a safe email. They've even included a legal blurb to make it feel more real. In this example, they're requesting additional information like passport, home address, and other details. The other sort of phishing examples that you'll typically see would be your email box is full and you need to click on this link to upgrade your quota. You've got a parcel from FedEx or from Toll or from Australia Post, and you need to click on this link to provide additional information. Some other phishing examples might be you've received 8 messages and they're held in an inbox that you need to click on a link to log in and have a look. And in this example, they're mimicking Office 365. And the aim here is to steal your credentials so they can get access to your email systems to then cause fraud to attack other organizations or other businesses. This is another example where they're saying somebody's sharing a document with you and you need to log in to view the document. Because they don't know what kind of cloud service you're using, they've provided a nice little handy portal which makes you self-select and provide credentials either for Google Drive, iCloud, OneDrive, or for Dropbox. So again, these are techniques to convince you to provide additional information that they potentially don't have. In this example here, this is an example of smishing, which is sending you a SMS. And as you can see in these examples, they obviously know me because they've used my first name, and there's a link for me to click on. Now, when I click on that link, a couple of things could happen. They could infect the device that I'm using or take me to a site where they further request additional information from me or lure me into some sort of scam. The important thing to note in this example is the mobile phone numbers are random and can change, but if they know and identify you enough, they could spoof the number, which is pretend to be the telephone number of somebody who you have in your contact list, either a business partner, your spouse, or your children. In the next example, the other thing that will happen when you click on the link is they'll lure you in through various scams. Sometimes they'll use celebrities to make the scam seem legitimate. And you can see there's an example there where they've done a mashup of information from ABC to make it look like legitimate news that you would then sort of read through and then get to the end of the article and then click on and participate in the scam. Scams, some of the things that they're looking for is really credential harvesting. So if you have had a data breach of some sort or been involved in a data breach, they may know your usernames, they may know your passwords, and they'll often send you an email or a link that'll list those things as a way to kind of prove that they have control or access of your systems. They'll also use fear and intimidation and embarrassment to try and convince you that they've got information that they don't currently have to blackmail you. So there's some of the things to look out for. Rob, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Damien. I guess intro, my name is Rob Wilson. I've been in IT for about 20 years. I've been in cybersecurity for 15 of those years. Most of my career has been over in Canada and the US. Recently, I've moved over from Canada last year to Australia with my family, so happy to be here. You'll recognize the accent. I'm currently in Vincent's as manager of cybersecurity and forensic technology. I've seen a lot of different aspects of cybersecurity, even before Damien, you mentioned before they even called it cybersecurity. That's a recent happening. So worked on Air India bombing, one of the largest bank card breaches of all time, responded to DDoS attacks, all sorts of phishing. I think I've seen my fair share of phishing scenarios in my time. So I've seen a lot of how the industry has been changing from where it was 15 years ago to where it is now. So it's been an interesting ride. So I guess that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass it over to Darren for his introduction. Darren, over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome, Dame and Sarah. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Hopefully you get some value from it. My name, obviously, Darren Kane, Chief Security Officer at the National Broadband Network. Hopefully it's up there in Bendigo working well and everyone's actually utilising it in these very strange and unique and unprecedented, is the words, times. My background, I actually grew up about 150 k's north of you, up in Deniliquin, so a product of Denny. Found my way down to Kilmore, go to boarding school, and from there on to Melbourne. At 18, I joined the Federal Police and went away to Canberra and spent 13 odd years in the Federal Police, mainly organised crime and drugs. So that's my background. That is working on people doing that rather than doing it myself. After that, 6.5 years at the Securities Commission, ended up the Assistant Director of National Enforcement. And from there, I went to Telstra, did 11 years with the telco, and that's where I was introduced for the first time to technology-based crime. So I was the Corporate Security Director globally. I had the accountability for Telstra's security from about 08 through to about 14. And in 2015, I took on the Chief Security role here at the NBN. So here at the NBN, I have sole security account, sole enterprise-wide accountability for security risk for the NBN, which means everything from the old guards, guns and gates, physical security, some investigations, but mainly my focus nowadays is around cyber security, and that's what we're here to talk to you about this afternoon. A little about cyber security, and you can tell from the introduction of Damien and Rob that they're very skilled and knowledgeable in the area. And my background really is to manage some education and awareness around scams and the likelihood of scams and impacts on yourself from cyber criminals who are generally motivated from financial gain. I won't take up too much time because I'm hoping we might get the opportunity to answer some of your questions. So we'll leave it there and I'll throw back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Darren. Goodness me, what a way to start a session. Phishing, smishing and vishing, and police and Canada. That's a real mix we've got here, and we've got lots and lots to talk about. Let's just check back with our poll. So a resounding 78% said yes, they have been affected by scams, fraud or cybersecurity, and a 22% sitting on no. That's a good basis to start this conversation, hey? Seems like there's some real education that we can do in this space. So Darren, I'm going to start with you. What scams are you seeing at the moment, in particular regarding the NBN, which is targeting businesses?
Thanks very much. Well, look, there's a various number of scams, most of them cloning the NBN. So unfortunately for us, by the very nature of what it is that NBN do, we're into about 7.5 million premises right across the country, and the actual network itself is rolled out to over 11 million ready for service. So you can imagine at some stage, nearly every member of the community who actually has a premises connected will at some stage expect a phone call from the NBN. We don't do that. We don't make unsolicited phone calls. We don't send unsolicited email. One of the things that we do is actually work through our retail service providers like Telstra, like Optus, like Aussie Broadband and so forth to actually manage that contact for us. One of the more common scams we're seeing at the moment is robocalls. Nicole and Carol may ring up asking for residents being sent a fraudulent invoice for payment after they were offered to upgrade over the phone from Nicole or Carol. That's a more common scam that we're seen. Another is when you do get a phone call from a Nicole or Carol, they might ask you to press 1, and you often get push 1 and you never hear any more from them. Not uncommon, Sarah. Now, why they do that is to actually put you in a database of people who may be gullible for a second or third contact call. So just be aware of that one. That's a more common one. Another is remote access. So what they do there is they ring up, they say they're from the NBN and they'd like to actually access your computer to test for speed or network optimization. And what that basically means is that they'll actually ask you to get access to your computer for the purpose of testing the quality of the NBN. Again, remember, we do not ring you. We do not contact you. If you do get a phone call like that, it is not the NBN, it is most likely cyber criminals. What they do when they actually then take over your computer with a piece of software that gives them the remote access, sometimes now, Sarah, they're saying because of the effects of radiation from the types of software they're using, they may ask you to cover your computer screen and or to step away from your computer so you're not affected. Now, they do that because what may happen is they go into your internet banking and or anything else they might want to access to steal credentials such as identity credentials or financial institution credentials. And if you're standing in front of the screen and you see them doing that, well, then you may know that the gig is up. So they're 2 or 3 little common examples of them. They're probably the more common examples that you get. You get the robocall asking you to push 1 or 2, and when that happens, they generally will ring back knowing that you're someone who is gullible to a phone call. Second, there might be a robocall asking for an upgrade, and then they'll send you a fraudulent invoice, which again isn't the NBN. And third is the remote access, and they're the 3 more common.
Yeah, goodness me, that's really quite scary, because I'm already thinking in my head all these things have even happened to me. So when you put it in context, it's interesting that it happens so frequently.
Yeah, and look, I just really want to leave everybody listening and watching the webinar. We're not looking to actually address the issue of victim shaming. It is very, very common. They are very, very smart, and it is very, very difficult to identify that it's a scam. And the only real lever I've got to assist them is this education and awareness program. So if you have been affected, or you think you may have been affected, the best piece of advice I could give you is to contact your financial institution or contact your retail service provider as quickly as possible, and identify the fact that you think you may have been a victim of the scam, or you may have given them the access. And the quicker you do that, the more likelihood you may have in reducing the amount of harm they've done.
And I guess, Darren, you mentioned before that you have local NBN people on the ground working with businesses. So having that number close to hand, so you can always just pick up the phone and say, I've just had a funny call. Is that from you? And that might just put your mind at rest a bit.
And then there's our website. We've actually got a website stood up. It's www.nbn.com/scam advice. If they'd like to go to that website, that'll provide all the detail they need, Sarah.
Great piece of advice there. Damien, I'm going to bring this on to you. And thinking about all the things that you just spoke about before, sort of in the phishing and vishing stages, what other sort of cyber threats should business owners be really aware of and need to let their staff know about?
They should also be aware of what's called business email compromise, so particularly the accounts department, and that's where the cyber criminals may compromise the supply chain, so either a supplier you're acquiring things from or somebody that you're selling items to. And you could be getting invoices where they've manipulated or changed the banking details. So when you go to pay your invoices, they're actually being paid into a different account, and that account will typically be the account that the scammers have. So that's called business email compromise.
Goodness me. Yep. So getting your finance teams on board with this education is really, really important too. Over to you, Rob, and I'm going to think about your sort of global and international experience. Now, how does Australia compare with the rest of the world? And why do small Australian SMEs really, do they really get targeted by scammers?
Yeah. Good question. So the threats are largely the same. The stats are Australia is the 15th most secure company in the world. So pretty good. Better than last year. So we are making improvements year by year. Again, but what we're seeing in Australia really, we see globally, is the phishing, malvertising, the business email compromise that Damien's mentioned. It would cost about at least $1 billion for our economy. I think if there's other stats where there's multiple billions per year that cost Australia, it's pretty significant. So with that, the Australian government has put about $1.35 billion towards an investment towards cybersecurity to beef up our security overall over the next 10 years. That may sound like a lot of money, what's it going towards? But if you think of what it costs our economy in scams and frauds over, every year, it's just a drop in a bucket for their investment. So well worth the money that we're we're looking to put in and invest in this space. I guess one thing I just wanted to mention on the business email compromise that just to jump on off of what Damon was talking about, that is one thing that we're seeing a lot of lately. And how it happens is, the bad actor will lay in wait in your system. Say if they get access to your email, they'll set up rules so they can literally see all the emails come in. And as soon as there's financial transaction, you have to pay the vendor, that's what they'll jump in. And so it may seem, you're talking with a vendor and they come back in just at the right timing. Hey, here's my new account detail. And then you feel like you're having this conversation with them, and then you send the money into the wrong account. So we see that's hugely popular right now. So your email system could potentially be compromised as we're speaking right now, with someone just laying there waiting for the right opportunity for you to pay a bill and have that transaction redirected into their account. So that's a big one that we're seeing. So, but yeah, back to your question, the threats and attacks, phishing, ransomware, business email compromised, the same threats that we're seeing in Australia, in Canada, globally. But yeah, we're putting some good investments towards the right areas in Australia. It's good to see.
Yeah, look, that's fantastic knowing that there is that investment. And I think, seeing today just Bendigo doing this innovation festival is exactly that. It's making it a topic of conversation that people are having more regularly, and wanting to learn more to keep themselves and their businesses safe. So talking about that, Damien, I'm going to throw something to you. The potential damage if credentials are stolen through a phishing scam, like what happens?
So the cost can vary quite significantly. So it could be as simple as breach of your email account, so that way they can take over your email and use that to attack other people that you might know. So it's a bit of a reputational damage to yourself, if you like. All the way through to financial loss. There have been examples with the business email compromise aspect of people sending $3 million to scammers when they thought they were paying their own sort of supplier. So it really varies quite greatly in terms of financial cost. But the key thing to remember is this can happen to anybody. Don't be embarrassed about it if it happens to you or you realize it's happened to you. Even cybersecurity professionals who you would think, should know better. We did a survey of the industry, and about 8% of cybersecurity professionals also fall victim to scams. And the reason being that they use different techniques, which is, emotional. People are often time poor, so you'll click on things and then sort of think about it later. So, the key message is don't be embarrassed if you've fallen victim to it. Get in contact with various agencies. I believe you can go to cyber.gov.au and you can actually report the fact that you've been a victim of cybercrime, and then they'll help refer you to the appropriate state and territory authorities to assist you as well.
And so thinking about something like identity theft happening online, I guess I'm thinking it's probably all our responsibilities to look out for each other to see if anything is happening unusually with a friend's Facebook or different messaging system, that we all have to look out for each other. So could you just talk me through a little bit about identity theft and what sorts of things, what patterns do they follow?
So with identity theft, they're looking for additional information. For example, your passport. They might send you an email saying, in order to give you a tax reimbursement, you need to provide, evidence. And so to provide evidence, you've got to provide a copy of your passport. And that's got a lot of sensitive information. They might be requesting your address details if they haven't got that. And the danger is that with all the data breaches that sort of occur, in Australia alone in the last 6 months, there's been about 518 data breaches, which is a 16% increase on the previous year. they harvest all these credentials and details, and then they enrich that data. And then with that data, they will request missing pieces from you, and then they can effectively set up another persona or an identity of yourself, and open up mortgages in your name, open up credit cards and things like that in your name. So effectively, it is quite a important area to guard your information carefully, and to not just give it to anybody that requests it either via phone or over email.
Mm. So they really are putting together a jigsaw puzzle of who you are to create this person. That's quite scary, isn't it? So moving on to some real true advice. So what we want for our listeners today, we've got business owners on the line. We need some good takeaways. So Darren, thinking, obviously we spoke about education and being aware, but what's your key advice on how business owners can really, truly protect their business?
Thanks, Sarah. As I mentioned, I'll leave some of the more technical suggestions to Rob and maybe Damien, and I'll give the meat and potato variety from my boy from Denny. The most obvious one is never leave your laptop anywhere where people can actually view what's on it. Be careful of that. And if you're working from home at the moment and you're working for a company or even your own company, never let anybody else use your device. Quite often you see people allow their kids to use their work device or their mobile devices. You probably don't know what the kids are clicking on or what the kids might load up onto it. So there's a simple suggestion. Protect your home wireless network modem. Have you changed the actual default password that the modem came with? Have you put a password on it? Really simple stuff. Never reuse passwords. If one site is compromised, then others will become compromised. So consider a password manager if you're finding it complicated to keep track of all your passwords. And I know that's an issue. They should never be left inside a car or at the coffee shop, devices where they're unattended, because not only do they actually break in and damage your car to get to the device, but they usually take the device, which is full of sensitive information. Mm. Shred documents. There's an easy one. This isn't about technology always. If you've got sensitive information lying around the house that can give up your identity, understand to put the whole document into a bin. May later be seen at the refuge or at the tip. So actually rip things up or put them through a shredder before you throw them away. It's best to avoid using free Wi-Fi hotspots. Be careful about doing that. These are often unsecured, and if possible, they can be snooped on by others. Very, very smart, these cyber crooks. Another one is multi-factor authentication. Just to explain that, you may have a password on your device, but sometimes when you're logging into something that's significant and very, very private, like your internet banking or like a work-related address, you may actually be asked to actually send a code to your mobile phone and to take that code off your phone and put it back into your system. That's always a good idea. And probably the most important one, and then I'll throw to Rob and Damien, is to keep the software in your devices up to date by installing the latest software and upgrades. Don't put off those upgrades because they are put out to actually manage vulnerabilities and potential compromise. So I know it's a bit of a pain, and if you haven't got it on automatic, actually go back in and make sure there's no patches or updating that has to go onto the devices. And I won't go too far into the technicalities of it all. And again, all those simple hints and tips, if you haven't written them down, are available at that Scam Advice website that I provided earlier. And I'll throw to Rob and Damien.
Thank you. I guess I'll jump in here. Darren, good overview. There's a lot covered there. Definitely patching OS. My top one, I can't stress this enough, is protecting your passwords, and don't overuse or ever use your passwords. So if you don't have a password manager, definitely look at LastPass or Keeper or Dashlane. The top three are because what happens if you have a password and you log into a gym for a membership with that email and password combination, and then that gym potentially gets compromised, your email and password combination is then compromised. And so if you reuse that email and password combination multiple, through your corporate email and other avenues, someone potentially has your key to go around opening up all your other applications, right? So if you have one email and password combination, you're kind of just waiting to get compromised. It's the easiest thing. And once it's exposed, it's on the internet, it's sold, and people have it, and they try to get into your account. So look up a good password manager. And again, protect that password manager with two-factor authentication. So, you're looking at, once you have your password manager, it has all your passwords within it. So you need to protect that long password. And then within the password manager, you have really long passwords for all your different applications. So I don't tend to reuse my corporate email for gym memberships. So I have different emails that do different things. So I have my corporate email that I only use for business. I have a throwaway email that I only use for signing up for third parties, that if it gets compromised or the third party gets compromised, it's not going to affect me at all. So you start kind of having this layered protection with your identity. So your email is very, very important for your corporate and your personal. If you think of your personal email, you can reset bank accounts, you can reset LinkedIn, Facebook. So if someone gets into your personal email, they can potentially wreak havoc on your whole social identity. So two-factor on your personal email, protect that with everything you can. Backing up your data, for corporations, you say if you're doing everything and you do get ransomware, you do need to recover from that exposure. So you don't want to, in the end of the day, you don't want to pay the ransomware. You want to be able to or restore from your backup. So make sure you're doing appropriate backups for all of your critical data. One thing that's worth checking out is a framework for small and medium business. It's called the Australian Essential 8 framework. So it outlines 8 things that we are considering essential to do. It's great. It's pretty much a roadmap with what you should be doing. So it's patching, looking at Microsoft macros. So if you do click on a document and it has macros, they can execute. It goes through password management, restricting privileged access. Just thinking about email and privileged access. If you're a corporation and you have an IT guy in, say, Office 365, I would go up to your IT guy and go, hey, that admin account to get into the Office 365, is that backed up with two-factor, right? Often enough, the administrative account is, weak password or doesn't have two-factor. And these are real basic things. Someone's in with the administrative console on, say, Office 365 or into your Azure environment, they have full control. So you really want to be pressing, if you don't have a security guy, press your IT guy that they're doing all the appropriate measurements. Ask if they have a password manager. Two-factor is a good one. They're patching on a regular basis. I guess one last thing, a lot was covered with Darren, but malvertising. So if I'm a bad actor and I can set up a malicious advertisement and just put it on the internet, I think we just touched base on this briefly. It's called malvertising. And so the bad guys just sit in the back. They have this malicious ad up. You click on it, and the exposure comes through all, they could be grabbing your passwords, personal information, all sorts of different things. Advertisements are a lot of times malicious. So in the end of the day, you heard of fake news. So, but they are the avenue to potentially become compromised. By working in industry, I've just blocked all ads for the corporation. So all staff weren't able to see any ads just because they're sometimes risky depending on where you go. So, and again, you're trying to restrict the staff and what they can see on their side and what they can do. So I guess, Damien, anything I've missed? Over to you.
For me, it would be, I guess, backups. Make sure that you, as a business or as an individual, you back up and you test your backups to actually make sure that they work. Because often, people will do backups and have never tested it, and then an incident happens and they need to restore, and those backups don't actually work. Don't ever borrow a cable to charge your phone, whether you're an Android or an Apple user. Don't lend your cable out. Don't use charging stations that you haven't bought yourself from a legitimate source. Mainly because you can even compromise phones these days using cables that are specially designed to remotely send commands as soon as you plug them into a device. So that's why you should never sort of borrow somebody else's cable if somebody's willing to kind of lend it to you. Always be suspicious of email attachments and links that you get in email. Even if it's a PDF and you think, PDFs are fine, criminals can actually embed malicious content within a PDF. So as soon as you open it, it'll exploit a vulnerability and then actually activate and take control of your device. The other thing as well, from a physical security perspective, when you use credit cards, don't let them go out of your site. I'll give you an example where, I was scammed in a taxi. You often just quite easily hand over your card, particularly if you're sitting in the front seat, to the cab driver because you think it's all going to be safe. You can see it. The person put it through the reader. It didn't read correctly because of the angle that they held it at, and then they wiped it on their pocket to clean it, to say, it must have some dirt on it, and then put it through the reader again. And what I didn't realize at that point in time was in their pocket they had a cloner. And so they had actually cloned my card. And then while I was overseas, they were performing transactions. So, even from a physical security perspective, how often do we go into a restaurant and we're quite comfortable to sort of give our card to somebody in the restaurant who goes away to do the transaction and payment. So make sure you never let that card go out of your sight.
Yeah. Oh, look, that's actually really fascinating that went to so many different levels there as to the physical nature of keeping things safe. As if you've got a diamond ring or a newborn baby to look after, that you really have to think like that. And then the other nature of the password security, which I think we're all guilty of going through that phase of password 1, password 2, password 3, because you just need to keep remembering it. So gosh, some really good takeaways there. We're getting a lot of questions coming through. So if you don't mind, I'm going to actually direct some of these questions from the audience because there's some really fascinating ones here. So Darren, I've got one for you from Paul Chapman. Who are the people behind the phishing and other scams? Are they always big crime? And are they typically coming from another country?
It was a really good question. A really easy way for me to explain it is think of the old concrete handball or tennis, the 4 squares. Top left square, state, nation state. So think perhaps currently in the news at the moment of the nation states who may have nefarious intent against our country. And I won't go into those because it'll only get me into trouble working for a government business enterprise, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Next top right square is cyber criminals, usually motivated by financial gain, usually positioned overseas. And again, I won't name the countries, but you could probably guess most of those. And they're most difficult to stop. Bottom left-hand corner, hacktivists, people like the Anonymous Group and others who actually have got a political motivation and want to actually interfere with you and create difficulties through compromise, particularly DDoS and or ransomware. And then ultimately the bottom right corner, I call script kiddies. So kids that have grown up with technologies or digital natives, if you like. And they are able to do it because they can. It's a bit like graffiti. Kids are really talented and they want a canvas to display their talent. These kids have grown up with technology. They're really talented and they want a blank canvas to demonstrate just how smart they are. So there's 4 examples of the likely origins of malware and compromise. The most common, of course, is the cyber criminal, the top right, motivated by money. And you're seeing a lot of that demonstrated through these ransomware attacks of late, where Damien's given a good example. You click on a link, the link delivers a payload, the payload infects and encrypts most of your data, and they expect you to pay a cryptocurrency ransom to release your data. Now, the downside to doing that, even if you're thinking about paying the ransom, is in this country and in most Western worlds, there's such issues as anti-money laundering and terrorism financing. So even though you might be doing the right thing in paying off the ransom, you may in fact be breaching the law because you're doing the wrong thing. So really difficult, but that's the best question, or a best answer I can give to the question as to who are the crooks and what are they doing it for?
I can name some of the countries if you want without getting Darren into trouble. I'd look at countries like China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Russia are fantastic at information manipulation or misinformation to sway a democratic society to vote one way or another, or to cause civil unrest. I guess the US election is a classic example of that. You look at countries like North Korea. The challenge for North Korea is, they're a sanctioned country, so how do they get money? So one of the mechanisms is to perpetuate scams, and so they can draw money and income into the country by scamming individuals in other countries. China is very good at a whole range of things, and not to be unfair to China, every country has a defensive and an offensive capability in cybersecurity. So governments are constantly testing each other's boundaries. Everybody's looking for additional information. It's the old world of physical spies that's kind of moved into a digital era.
Yeah, and I guess just one more note on that, on phishing and these types of scams. 10, 20 years ago, it was more the smash and grab. Like, they would try to get into your organization as quickly as they can and take whatever they can quickly in and out within a day. Nowadays, it's they'll get into your organization and really lay in wait. It's the low and slow, methodical. They'll be there for months on end, learning the systems, learning how cash moves, and then they'll strike when they have full understanding of what it is that they're looking at. So if you do get compromised by a phishing email or something of that nature, someone may be in your system for multiple months before they strike and walk away with whatever it is.
Yep.
Rob, that actually... Sorry.
They might be motivated by money, but others it might be motivated by intellectual property that you might own. Some of it might even be around trade. So, if you're a large mining company and you've got another country that buys a lot of resources, they're very keen to understand what's the cost of extracting that iron ore or coal out of the ground, because that helps with the negotiation bargaining point. So, some of it is, as nuanced as that. It's not necessarily just sort of trying to steal money from you, but it's intelligence and data.
Getting that competitive edge as well. This is a really good point to move on to this question. We spoke about phishing. So Aaron has just said, how do I know? I'm heading back to my desk, and how do I know if my emails have been hacked or not? Is there a big warning flag on my screen that tells me?
I can jump in here and answer this one. So that's hard to determine after the fact. So there's technology called email gateway, where email will come through an email gateway and do an inspection on an email to see if the links are okay, if the attachments are okay, and then it'll send forward to your organization. If you don't have an email gateway in place, it's hard to determine if there's anything malicious within or what's happened in the past. One thing I would look at that's common with business email compromise or phishing, more business email compromises, if you're on an Office 365 system, go into the administrative console that would pretty much have access to the back end to see if there's any rules that are suspicious within your corporation. So this is how one of the big business email compromise would do. They would set up a rule saying, any email, Sarah, going to you will come to me also. And then I'll look at it, see if there's anything interesting. I'll pass it forward to the intended recipient until it's one that I really want to look at and I can strike on. And that's one I would act on, right? So looking at any rules within your email that are suspicious, forwarding rules to emails that aren't right. That would be a big indication. So definitely have your IT guy doing a kind of an overhaul, looking at your passwords, making sure it's two-factor, and making sure that there's no malicious rules set up. And then again, it's hard after the fact if you've already been phished in an email to determine running those scans, looking at making sure your software is up to date, and likewise. So,
as an end user, or a home user, you might have some luck where you notice your system is behaving very slowly compared to what it would normally behave, or suddenly you're receiving all these bounce back messages in your email saying unable to get to sender, the recipient wasn't able to receive it. If you're suddenly getting hundreds of those, it's an indication that somebody's compromised your system and they're using you to now spam a whole bunch of other people. And so you're seeing all these bounce back or out of office messages.
That's a good takeaway. Look, this one actually isn't a question. It's from Eric, and what he said is, last year our business was caught out by 55 grand because the scammer said that the bank account details had recently been changed. It's real. Goodness me, you don't want to see that, and my heart goes out to you, Eric, but thank you for saying that, because I think that puts a real value on what we're telling you here. Darren, I've got a question for you. Sorry, I'm going to find it here. So this is also from Eric. So what does an SME do? Do they ask NBN or do they engage consultants? And, what sort of cost to a small business is this kind of setup? You may not be able to talk about the costing, but certainly give us some indication as to what stages do we have to go through?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question for a small to medium business that is actually trying to become more cyber conscious. It doesn't cost a lot of money there, and if you're actually that's probably the information that should be more freely available. And it's sort of something that definitely Damien, who's the chair of the Australian Information Security Association, could take away, is that we need to give easy access to small business owners to understand what it might cost to become more cyber conscious. I can tell you it doesn't cost a lot at all. And in fact, the information that Rob and Damien have provided today is free. You just need to be able to actually write it down or to get a list of it somewhere and then deploy it. Shredding sensitive information before you put it in the bin is simple. Patching and upgrading your software that you paid for, it's all online. It's simple. Any basic IT security or IT expert could do that for you. If you're running a different accountancy program like perhaps Xero or MyBooks or one of those QuickBooks, all of those programs have to be patched and upgraded. You should be doing that, and that's really simple stuff. Never reuse passwords. That's simple stuff. Now, if you actually do the basics, the personal security hygiene, that is a very good start. And then actually go to Scam Advice or send emails through to that the website that Damien suggested to be put on to further information about who they can reach out to actually give them more elevated or escalated advice. The one thing I would leave you with from today's session, it doesn't cost a lot of money to be more cyber conscious and improve your overall security hygiene. So please don't go out spending thousands and thousands of dollars thinking that's required. Do your research, reach out, find and understand the right people, and it shouldn't cost that great deal of money at all.
Yep. It's even things like culture, improving awareness and education in your organisation, even changing business processes. So, to avoid a business email compromise scam, have the accounts department, whenever somebody sends an email to say our banking details have changed, actually pick up the phone and call the original number that you had in your records. Yep. And just verify, did you actually send me this, and are these the correct details? So at least that way you've got different channels of communication. You're not just relying purely on email, which could be compromised.
Yeah. That's interesting. That one post-it note in that finance department saying double check the accounts could be the difference between $55,000, hey? Look, we will actually send an email out afterwards with the help of Bendigo Council with all the details of things that we've spoken about. Some of those emails, I know we've all mentioned some websites here that would be key for people. So, rather than frantically writing things down, we'll certainly make sure that you get access to those afterwards so you can share them with your teams. But I've got a bit of an exciting question here from Georgia, and Damien, it's posed to you. So she's thinking about the next generation and the jobs for the future. Can you talk about different jobs within the sector? How exciting.
Yes, so cybersecurity is a huge, diverse area. Don't think that you need to just purely be a technical person to be a cybersecurity expert. So you'll have some people that have got technical skills that might go into sort of coding or what they call, software security analytics type aspects. But there's a whole range of people in terms of, sales expertise, marketing expertise, human behavior aspects. There's even, consultancy approaches. So don't feel that you just need to be a technical individual. You could be somebody who's really good at strategy. And so you could merge, both the business world with the technical world from a translation of language between organizations. So there's a role for everybody in cybersecurity. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. If you are a technical whiz, some of the roles that you might be interested in are penetration testing, which is where you try to be, a hacker, but from a good perspective, and you're testing organizations' defenses with their permission to then give them a report in terms of what was vulnerable, what wasn't vulnerable. You might even be somebody who, is not technical, but is really good from a policy perspective, developing policies for organizations, looking at supply chains and assessing them. So it could even be from an audit perspective as well. So there's a lot of different skills. And in order for organizations to be successful, it really requires diversity of background, diversity of gender, and diversity of thinking as well.
That's great. Gosh, this really is it's an exciting world for you, Georgia, I think, in this space. And the more people we have aware and the more knowledge we have out there, the better. So this one's from Aaron, and what Aaron's asking is, what is an effective cyber breach response plan? So I'm guessing you're sort of ABC that you can have in your office that people know when something's happened. This is what we do. Oh, okay. I don't know who to ask then. Rob, okay. You're going to take that one?
Yeah, this is not a straightforward one. So what I've done in the past and what I would recommend doing, because one size doesn't fit all organization. So I would look at, depending on, your organization, big or small, and the industry, you have to look at first the threat would be the top threats to your organization. So if it's email, or if there's, depending on how you operate your business and how the data moves and where it's stored, where would the largest threats? And then what I would do is create multiple playbooks based off those threats and then practice them within the team that would be responding. So a playbook would be, what would we do with phishing, a successful phishing attack, or email compromise? So you open it up, and step one, you look at the account, you contain the incident, you get the right people involved. There's communication. There's both technical and management responses. So this is much I can speak to this topic on probably an hour. But I'll try to keep it short. You almost have to have two different playbooks, one for the technical stream, one for the management, because depending on the size of the breach, management needs to come in, communicate across the staff internally, and communicate externally to the media, depending on, again, the size of your organization. So it's a real broad question, and I can have full sorts of answers, but I would look at the threats towards your industry, pick the top three, create playbooks. Anyone in the field, I'm happy to determine, if you want to drop me an email after what the top threats would be, and then point you in the right direction of some free advice. But yeah, it's one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So yeah, kind of a broad answer. But yeah, more to it,
Yeah, well, I guess, it's a complicated topic, and I think it's a fair point that you don't have a one size fits all. It is dependent on where you're coming from. Darren, I've got a question for you from Michael. Michael said, we have seen Telstra and the federal government weigh into cybersecurity by blocking SMS related to scammers. Now, do you think that this is an area that NBN is likely to weigh into? And if so, what areas would NBN consider as a priority?
I saw that today in the news, or it was yesterday, that it was announced that Telstra was working with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre to actually effectively block known potential payloads through SMS, and I think they actually identified the threat. That's a government policy, and that's the Telstra working with the Security Centre to do that. We provide a wholesale broadband pipe, and the RSPs and individuals provide the content or the payload that travels across. For us to actually reach within the pipe is a very big step, and I don't think it's a likely step in this current environment. When they're actually talking about clean pipes, and that was something that was raised in the cybersecurity strategy, the 2020 strategy, it was more about known knowns and stopping that being in the pipe. But as far as and I don't want to get too technical here, Sarah, but I would have thought that that's a very big step, and it would definitely be driven by government and not necessarily by the NBN.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's good to have something current to chat about too, and seeing that coming in that's from yesterday. So here's a quick one, and I am very conscious of time. Talking about phishing emails. So Damien, Aaron has said, how valuable do you see testing your staff with phishing emails?
So testing your staff can be very useful and handy, but you've got to go beyond just testing, because what's been shown through a number of studies is having people aware of something is effective for a short period of time, but you need to structure it in a way where you're testing your staff, you're identifying who's most vulnerable, and you're assisting them as opposed to berating them in terms of for falling for a scam or a phishing exercise. When somebody is, aware of something, the effective window is a short period of time. But if you change the behaviour of somebody in terms of educating them enough and nudge them in the right direction, they can be a lot more effective over a larger period of time. And it's also really about relating it to helping them to be safe so that they can show their family how to be safe at home, because safe practices at home will then sort of naturally flow into the workforce as well.
Yeah, that's it really is. It really boils down to this education, doesn't it? And having that knowledge and having everyone refreshed constantly about what it is, what do we know, what do we keep safe, and how are we doing things, and every day making it, or every week certainly making it part of your management meeting that are we all up to speed with this? What do we know? And then obviously reaching out to your experts. Just one very, very quick question for each of you, and literally I want a 20-second pitch on this. Where do you see cybersecurity in the next 10 years? Over to you, Rob. 20 seconds.
My interest in cybersecurity in the next 10 years, it would be more around the artificial intelligence space. It's changing so quickly where to keep up with trends, you need a technology such as AI to help us out, to stay ahead of what's happening, the threats and the risks. So I'm interested in everything AI, cybersecurity. That's
AI. Yeah. Over to you, Damien. 20 seconds. Next 10 years?
Data is the new oil. So really, any information that you have has value, regardless of whether you think it doesn't, because somebody could find value in that information.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. Darren.
Sarah, in answering, both Rob and Damien got it right, but I do want to leave you with this really simple message. Technology in the digital world has invited us into a whole new space of opportunity. We shouldn't be frightened of it. We should be embracing it. And I encourage everybody to use it. But I'm also encouraging them to be aware of the risks, learn and research the risks, and effectively manage that responsibility yourself. Don't leave it up to anybody else. And hopefully if that message gets through, the decade will be all about opportunity rather than challenge.
Yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And with people like Georgia on our side coming up, we'll see her on a panel soon, I hope. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our conversation on scams, fraud and cybersecurity and how to protect your business connectivity. My apologies if we didn't answer your question, but we will be sending some emails out afterwards. So here at the 2020 Bendigo Innovation Festival, we thank our panelists and contributing organisations. We have Damien Manuel, Director at Deakin Centre for Cybersecurity, Research and Innovation. We have Darren Kane, Chief Security Officer, NBN Australia, and Rob Wilson, Manager of Cybersecurity and Forensic Technology Division, Vincent. Thank you so much for joining us from the 2020 Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. Goodbye from all of us.